Welcome back to the CEO Next Door podcast, episode 2. Today, we'll be chatting with my co host, Donovan Morrison, who's our current VP of Growth with Main Event Digital and former CEO at Luna Lights. He's been an entrepreneur since a young age, and well, frankly, he's still at a young age. We've been working together for the past year, and I've had the opportunity to learn a bit about him, and his story is intriguing, especially for someone his age. And with that, take it away, Donovan.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really can't believe that we're here and I am actually doing this. Never thought I would get into the podcast scene, but you know what? Here we are. It's officially podcast time. Let's get this rolling. So like most people, I don't find myself necessarily interesting and find it to be a bit awkward talking about myself and my life experiences, but upon reflection, I do feel that my career experience is somewhat unique for someone in their late 20s. So we can dive in and hopefully I will be able to share at least a few nuggets of wisdom during this episode, things that we've experienced or learned from our time building and selling Luna Lights. But I am all for brevity, so hopefully we'll be able to keep this succinct and interesting. But I'm really planning on sharing during this, let's call it half hour to 40 minutes, some background on my upbringing, experience in the business world, and hopefully a few non-traditional or non-cliche takeaways. I know there are a number of entrepreneurship and business podcasts and talks, and you hear a lot of the same stuff. So I'm hopeful that some of what I share will be unique and valuable for our listeners today. Does all that sound okay?
That sounds perfect. Let's do this. So let's see. You're coming out of school. Recent grads have a variety of paths to choose from. How did you land on entrepreneurship? And more importantly, of all things, senior living. I don't think that's a very common path. Maybe the entrepreneurship part, but then targeting senior living.
It is not. We
That's the least
certainly
sexy area that I
no.
can think of.
No,
Go ahead.
certainly when we were first getting started with Luna Lights, we got a number of weird looks when we told people what we were working on. But really, the story starts even before that. I think it started growing up and learning from my family experiences and then taking some of that learned behavior, taking the pieces that I saw that I liked and incorporating those into my own journey and trying to do something to help others, even in first high school type job. And then obviously afterwards, as I got into school and then started Luna Lights. But yeah, from a young age, my family was into entrepreneurship. My father actually started his own business that he is still running to this day. So growing up, I saw the beautiful aspects, one might say, of being your own boss, making your own hours, not necessarily reporting to anyone, running on your own schedule, and really having the decision-making power to direct the course of your business versus just being told what to do. And that was something I quickly realized I wanted. Obviously can operate in more traditional work structures, but found that dynamic to be interesting. But also I think as much of the positives, saw the full gamut, saw the times where there was instability and doubt and uncertainty. And that can be really difficult, especially growing up as a young kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, and maybe when business is down. And not only does that impact your business and your livelihood, but then that can spill over into family life, which when business is tense, home life is tense.
Sure
And
is.
Mike, I'm sure you know that all
I,
too well with being
yes.
involved with Main Event, right?
Yeah, and we have two entrepreneurs in this house, and my wife runs a business, and so it can go. The stress or the success and celebration could come from either of us, but we try to leave the office at home because we both work at home or in our
Yep.
respective offices within the home, and then once it's time to spend, quality time with the family, we try to put all that behind us and just enjoy what we have. But
And that's
yeah,
healthy.
yeah,
That's the way to do it. And I truly feel that my father, my mother was an occupational therapist,
okay,
or is still an occupational therapist, and working with those who are severely depressed. So another, not necessarily on entrepreneurial venture, but something that is incredibly. I'm so proud of her that she's able to do that. Something I could never do, but another career where leaving work at work was really important. I
right,
felt my parents did a great job with that, even when there would be times where work could be stressful, leaving that and then refocusing at the end of a school day to kind of come together as a family. But with that being said, obviously there's going to be some stuff that spills over. So I think I got from an early age really a full true education on what it's like to be an entrepreneur and what it's like to start your own business. And it was an interesting upbringing at that. So I'm an
before you
only
go any
child.
before you go any further,
Sure,
I want
sure.
to hear about your dad's business. What was this business, and what's he, how did it change in the last 20 years? What's he up to now?
Yeah, so he is still at it. He's a manufacturer's rep in the glamorous industry of selling rubber gaskets and
Wow.
extruded parts. Yeah, quite the interesting, yeah, as I said, glamorous
Yes.
industry to be operating in. But it takes a while because it's essentially a sales role. And when you're starting out, you're building up your book of business and
Sure.
you're trying to increase your number of accounts and the size of the deals that you're working on because you're earning a commission off of that. So that's where in the early days, before he started gaining a lot of traction, it was a little bit more tenuous. But then once you start establishing a solid client base, it really can be a great opportunity. But I think one thing I learned from him was he is now has done very well for himself, but it's not, surprisingly, it's something that is overly enjoyable or interesting. And that was something that he instilled in me from a young age, is trying to find work that you are passionate about
Sure.
and that you want to do, because that can make a world of difference. And obviously you need to hit a point where you're able to financially support not only yourself, but your family as well. But that, as long as you can hit that, I think a valuable learning from a young age was that piece of trying to find, okay, what do I want to do and how can I monetize that?
Sure. So
But
senior living.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We'll get into that in a second,
Yeah,
but
sure.
yeah. So just in general, I think there was a combination of things that drove me to wanting to set my own path, and it was parental experience as well as just my upbringing. So I am an only child. I'm one of those, and had the first 8 years of my life very traditional. So was in a suburb of Minneapolis,
Mhm.
went to private school, very privileged, great opportunities, great experience, and in a wonderful neighborhood, made a lot of friends. But at 8 years old, when I was 8, my parents found a pretty unique, cool house that was on the edge of suburbia, edging into rural. And it was on a lot of acreage back in the forest. So our only neighbors were a large pink house that you could barely see through the trees. Never really knew those folks. There was always something weird going on, one of those houses that you couldn't really put your finger on, but knew something was amiss. And then on the other side was a llama farm. So those
Wow.
are my friends.
Okay. You hung out with the llamas.
Yes, exactly. So it was a bit of a social shock for me,
Mhm.
and I had to quickly learn how to be self-sufficient because I didn't have any siblings and I didn't have anyone in the neighborhood. So it was always driving if I wanted to see friends. It's 20-minute drive to school. And it was isolating and it was
Mhm.
lonely and
Sure.
it was incredibly difficult at such an important time in a child's development,
Right.
a critical time to be going through this. So it was an adjustment to
Mhm.
say the least. But I also think it helped me develop into the person I am today, in that it allowed me to direct all of my efforts and all of my attention into my schoolwork
Mhm.
because
Great.
I had nothing else to do. I was bored.
Right.
So I kind of figured, well, if there's not much else going on, might as well excel at this and set myself up for success later on in life,
Mhm.
which helped teach me a lot of valuable lessons and principles in dedication and persistence. But also just put me, I was able to dedicate the time to it and due to lack of distractions. So it was one where really, if I think for anyone, if you get bored enough, you can occupy yourself with anything. And I don't want this to come across as my throwing myself a pity party. I had again a great upbringing, loving family, wonderful parents. They provided me with the resources that I needed to be successful and have continued to do so as I have grown out of school and into adult life. But it was just non-traditional. It
Got
wasn't
it.
riding bikes with friends, mom ringing the dinner bell. It was not that by any means.
So help me to bridge this gap. You're obviously a successful entrepreneur
Sure.
starting and selling a business from such a young age, which not many people can say that. How did you bridge this gap into entrepreneurship? What were you up to while your parents were raising you that was entrepreneurial? Because you can't just get started right out of college as an entrepreneur. I mean, usually there's some roots there. So what were you up to?
Correct. So when I got to high school, it was time to find first job. So was looking around, applied to a few local places, a mini golf course, which I didn't get. I'm not still bitter about it or anything, but uh, and started kind of thinking through what I wanted to be doing and how I could earn some money as a kid. I had been successful even in middle school and was performing at a very high level in pretty much every subject across the board. So I went back to my middle school and inquired with them whether there may be any private tutoring opportunities because I figured, hey, I'm good at this. I know what I'm doing. Maybe I can lend some wisdom and some of what I've learned to younger kids who could use some help. So got in touch with my previous teachers, some parents that I knew who had younger children in the middle school, and just started rolling. Got a handful of clients, and essentially set up my own tutoring business where I'd help kids a couple days a week, drive to their house, work with them for an hour, hour and a half, specifically on math, and was earning at a much higher rate. I think I was at like 20 bucks an hour, which as a 14, 15-year-old was a lot of money, but then it saved the parents too, because they're not paying a lot to contract out with like a private tutoring firm. So I identified that win-win scenario where I could make essentially as much as my peers while working half the number of hours.
I'm sure you were making more than your peers at that point.
Yeah, it was okay. It was all right. And obviously I did some of the more traditional roles as well on the side, pouring beer at the Minnesota State Fair. I manied for a little while, which was certainly fun.
That's stressful.
Yeah, it was. It was, but again, good life lessons all around. In general, though, I think all of those experiences in totality helped me realize that there are alternative ways to make a living, and that if you are talented in a certain area, I know this is very millennial of me to say, but that work can have a purpose and that you can share your skills with others, and it can be beneficial for everyone involved. So figured, why not do this? Being your own boss, again, what I'd seen from my father, having that decision making power and being able to operate outside of a set system, for lack of a better words. And
Right.
I think that gets into what I was hitting on a little bit earlier, where just even throughout my my somewhat brief career thus far is truly loving what you do and making that a priority. So yeah, it was really getting me back to what we were discussing just a little bit or hitting on earlier, where I just find it crucial to enjoy what you are working on. I mean, it's the old adage, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That I don't fully buy into, because at the end of the day, you're still working and you're still, you'd probably prefer to be doing something else, but it makes the time go by much faster, and just makes for an overall more fulfilling experience when you can be working with people that you like, really maximizing your skill set and truly contributing. It makes all the difference in the world.
Couldn't agree more. Out of all the jobs I've had that, were when I was younger that I didn't love, I was watching the clock. I was counting every minute, and it was like a nightmare. And I then, retooled and found what I really loved, technology, e-commerce, digital marketing. My days fly by. I don't even really, I get to the end of the day. I'm like, oh crap, I gotta shut it down for the day. And I don't even want to. So that's a good career. And with that, I don't really ever plan to retire, because what am I going to do? I enjoy what I do so much that I'll keep doing this until I die.
Yeah, and I think that's a great mindset. And I really think that you can continue doing it and just reduce the amount that you're doing it, and you'll be able to enjoy it over time. And I know all of this, it's much easier said than done. And at the end of the day, work is still work, but we only have a given amount, a short time on Earth. And I think it behooves us to make the most of it and really understand what makes you happy and tap into that. And if that is work, all the better. I think it's important to find a career that provides you with the flexibility to also be able to experience life to its fullest.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've come to value, and I saw growing up, and even in my own career have really appreciated the ability to not necessarily work a 9 to 5. And as long as you're getting your work done and making progress and it's good work, you can work whenever and live your life however you want to. And again, that is a broad generalization. You obviously need to be able to, you need availability at certain times, but I do think there is something to be said about experiencing life's big moments and not missing out because you only have so many PTO hours or days. Being able to spend time with your loved ones, like you were mentioning earlier. You are working so much that sometimes you get to the end of the day and it can be difficult to unplug, but you need to. because you have a family, you have people, you have friends, and they are the folks who matter most.
For sure. Yeah. So, I appreciate the guidance and the life lessons, but I want to reel us back in and get us back to, your first venture backed business at the age of 22, because I'm just enthralled with that. So talk to me about college and what you were up to there, and how did you start this company, and what happened with it?
Sure. So wrap up high school in a good position to go to take the next step, head to college, and fortunately found myself accepted into Northwestern University in Evanston. And that was actually what brought me originally to the greater Chicagoland area. And in going there, I had a very frank discussion with my parents where they were excited for me, had seen that my years of hard work paid off getting into this great university. But they also essentially said, if you're going there, you have to do a legit major, because if we're helping out financially, we want to know that our investment will be sound and that you'll be in good shape after graduating. So it essentially became engineering or bust, and focused in on biomedical engineering. Was strong in math and science, and thought, okay, this will translate pretty well. Well, got there year or two in, realized I don't really want to do this. This isn't for me. But felt I was in too deep at that point. So figured, let's just continue with it, get the degree. Learned a lot along the way, and I think it did set me up as much as specific knowledge. I think just general thought processes and approaching and solving problems was really helpful. But somewhere in the middle there, diverted paths a bit. But after my sophomore year, it was time to look more seriously at an internship, and had a few friends who spoke highly of this program called Design for America that is focused on human-centered design. So I applied and was accepted into their 6-week summer boot camp program, where you learn the principles of human or user-centered design. And from there, and in the process, work on a project. And I still remember sitting at my kitchen table, pitching this to my parents, basically saying, I'm going to work on this over the summer, work on a project. At the very least, I will learn a lot about design, something that could be applicable given my major, kind of an offshoot that I could divert paths into. And at the high end, it could turn into a business if we really hit on something. So we start the program, meet some folks, and establish a team of friends that feel where we can really make a difference. And we're starting to scope out a project and realize for the summer, we want to work on something that we are passionate about, but also an area where we feel we can make an impact. So we just start brainstorming, having a conversation about life experiences. And through that, we find that my teammates and I have all had experiences with grandparents who have fallen, and had seen how devastating that was for them, not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, monetarily. It's this massive issue that that's universal. Pretty much everyone has either experienced a fall or known a loved one who's fallen, but it doesn't get talked about that much. It's the number one cause of injury and injury related death for those 65 plus.
Wow.
But there aren't great solutions out there in the market to help address it. So we figured, all right, let's start with this overarching issue of how do we reduce falls, and then narrow it in from there. So spent a lot of the time during this program doing a deep dive, talking with researchers, spending time within senior living, talking with all stakeholders from older adults, admin, families, maintenance staff, everyone we could think of who came into contact with falls. And from there, we identified nighttime as a big issue, because when people fall, it's obviously very difficult. But when people fall at night, there's much less visibility into what's happening. So someone can fall in the middle of the night and no one knows about it. And then they're on the ground for hours or an entire night without receiving assistance. And obviously for these communities, that increases liability, injuries worsen, and it just makes a traumatic situation so much worse. So we saw that and just felt compelled to create something that would be better than more of, I'm sure you've seen like the life alert type pendants and pull cords that would improve upon this antiquated tech from the 80s and 90s, and that would help empower the care staff within these communities to be better and be more proactive about the care that they're providing. So we started brainstorming ideas, landed on, I think the first iteration was a light up rug of Luna lights, and then developed it out from there. From there, we got some good initial feedback from our mentors and partners through this program. They encouraged us to continue with it. So kept going over our last couple of years of school, and then really hit a crossroads when we were getting to graduation, which was a whole discussion, to say the least.
So let's talk about what you learned from this whole process.
Sure.
And then I'd love to understand where you ended on the project in school, and then how you took that concept and created a business out of it.
Yep. So I would say there are probably three things to keep in mind, three main things to keep in mind when starting a business. And really three main traits that everyone on a team within a business should possess. It goes for both founding a company as well as hiring hiring for additional team members, kind of across the board. But the three traits that everyone should possess: work with people who are reliable, work with people who are trustworthy, and work with people who you like and get along with. If you can hit those three, you're set. You need to trust that others who have varying skill sets will be able to perform in their roles to move the business forward. It kind of goes hand in hand with people being reliable. You need to trust that they'll do the work and trust each other, but also have that reliability aspect that they won't let you down. And that really does go hand in hand.
Yeah, empower them to get the job done.
Exactly.
That's a key word there.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the most important is probably the third one: work with people you like and get along with. This is going to be your second family. You will see these people day in and day out, maybe even more than your family. So you can have the most talented person on the planet on your team, but if it's not a culture fit, it's not going to work.
Right.
So that is, I think, number one in hiring. The most important aspect before skill set or knowledge base. Obviously those are important, but will this person fit into this organization that we're building? Secondly, and I hit on this earlier, I think you need to find a space where you feel you can make an impact, but a space that you're also passionate about. If you're working on something that you don't care about, you're not going to be giving it your all, and it will show. Was senior living my first choice? Probably not. I didn't necessarily consider it when I was entering school that it would even be a remote possibility. But we really learned so much about the industry, and I think more importantly from the older adults that we worked with, and seeing the impact that we were able to make for them. And I think we grew a lot in hearing about their life stories. I mean, working with folks who worked on the Manhattan Project, former Tuskegee Airmen, it was incredible hearing the life stories of the people, of the users that we were serving. So that piece is really big. And then finally, especially for us coming out of school, my co-founders and I, we all had engineering backgrounds, so didn't know the first thing about starting a business. And this was really before, this was back in we graduated in 2014. So this was before a lot of schools, including ours, had the innovation and entrepreneurship resources that they have today. We had to set our pride aside and realize that we didn't know what we didn't know, and that you have to be open to wade into unfamiliar territory and be okay with sometimes asking stupid questions and asking for help. Because as much as it can be an emotional, prideful thing, even more importantly, you can waste a lot of capital and time and resources on trying to figure something out when you could have just gone to someone who's an expert in the space and they can solve your problem in a matter of 5 minutes and teach you what you need to know to be successful in that specific arena moving forward. So being able to be okay with seeking out help is vital.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So going back to your experience in college, creating, on this project, did you have the aha moment where you're like, okay, let's make this into a reality and actually turn this into a business? What was that?
Sure. So I would say it was twofold. Initially, it was at the end of this design program when it was a quote unquote demo day, but it was more just student projects. There were a couple investors in the room, and we had our partner that we had been working on with throughout the summer. It was a local senior living community in Evanston where they were all present. And I think out of the room, ours received the most resounding feedback, positive feedback. Pretty much across the board, people thought what we had accomplished was impressive and encouraged us to continue working on it. The second piece, so I guess there are three things. Second piece is that in November of 2012, we were paired with an individual who's still a very close friend, but an individual who had started businesses previously and had found success. And he came on board as a mentor and then actually turned into an investor of ours. And he instilled in us the business acumen and drive to turn it into something, and kept us on track and really encouraged us to dream big. So his validation was important. But then I think the biggest thing was when we were coming to the end of our schooling, we realized that in order to be successful, we needed capital and even more direction than we had received. So we figured the best way to do that would be applying to business accelerator programs. Applied to, I think, 8 or 9 across the country, got rejected from every one. I think it was August after we had graduated. We were almost at the point, literally like days away from shelving Lunalights and maybe revisiting it years down the road when we had the capital and knowledge to do so. But we got accepted into the last program that we applied for, which is based out of Chicago. So we were already planning our careers post-college and scrapped all that, decided to go for it. One of my co-founders, Matt, was already actually working in Boston. He flew back to Chicago and we said, we're doing it. If they're putting in money, and they picked us, I think we were one of 8 portfolio companies from like 100 or 115 that applied. And it was a venture-backed accelerator. And we're like, if we're 22-year-old kids coming at this and a venture group is saying, yeah, there might be something here, maybe there's something here.
Let's take a pause, because I don't think you've really explained what the product is and how it works, because I think everyone would be interested to hear what this actually is.
Great question. Yes. So what we developed out was an automated lighting system that used behavior analytics to improve nighttime safety and reduce falls, specifically in the memory care and assisted living space.
All right.
So essentially, we utilize discrete sensors to track nightly activity and movement. So when a resident would get up out of bed at night, we could automatically light their way to the bathroom. And when they return back to bed and lie back down, lights turn off seamlessly. So we were getting away from the wearable technology and getting away from needing to turn anything on or off. It was fully automated, out of sight, out of mind. Really an elegant, beautiful solution that then on the back end, we were collecting data on behavior metrics during the night. So if someone needed help just getting up out of bed, we could notify a caregiver or member of the care team to come help them. Or if someone was a little bit more independent, and they got up and didn't return back to bed in a set amount of time could be indicative of a fall, someone who's wandering, or a medical emergency. So we're focused on getting people the help they needed in the moment. And then the final piece was that with the data that we were collecting, we could look at trends in behavior over time. And any deviations from normal patterns could be indicative of underlying health issues. So with that information, we would pass it along to the clinical teams at these communities, and they could then leverage it to help be more proactive and identify and address these conditions before they worsen or even lead to future falls.
What were the hardware and software customer facing tools that they were, implementing to get this set up?
Great question. So we had a core set of beliefs, and one of those was that safety should be simple. When operating in this space, we found that was necessary. So all it was a thin pressure sensitive strip that went on an individual's mattress. It was half a millimeter thin, so paper thin, couldn't feel it. Some lights that adhered onto the walls that would pop on when the individual got out of bed. And then we were entirely cloud-based. So everything was channeling through Wi-Fi in the community. And we just developed out a web platform, a web app that we provided access to the staff for. So they could log in, and then our notifications were sent out via text or email or even phone call. So there was it was high tech while still being low tech.
Got it. Interesting. And was it, obviously it was successful. Any numbers you can share of the growth and, number of beds it's currently installed in, something like that, to give us an idea of how successful you were?
Yeah, so I'm not sure where it is currently at. We were nationwide by the time we exited. So just to provide some quick context, we did the accelerator program late 2014, early 2015, raised our first round of capital in 2016, and then grew from there and continued installing within senior living communities, really across the nation until we were acquired in September of 2020. So not sure where it's currently at, but we certainly had covered a large swath of the US.
Okay. We'll leave it a little nebulous. All right. Well, tell us more about this business. Running it, what did you learn? What were some of your challenges?
Yeah. So, man, where to start? I think just one of my biggest takeaways is that everything is relationship driven. From selling to raising capital to building the right team, you never want to burn a bridge or, for lack of a better term, get into bed with the wrong people. It is so critical that you align yourselves with individuals who share a similar vision for your business, for you. That is probably one of the biggest takeaways that we saw. I would also say running a business is not a linear process, and you need to be focused on a number of things in tandem and understand how all of those pieces come together to create the puzzle. So for instance, since we had a hardware component, a chicken and the egg problem, where when we were originally trying to raise capital, we heard from investors, yeah, we like what you're telling us, but we need to see some data and results and customer buy-in before we make the leap to actually invest in you, which is understandable. But from our perspective, go, okay, but we need money to be able to go out and build this stuff to then go and get that data and get those results and start generating revenue. So it took a lot of, I would say, growth hacking to figure out how in the world do we create really that minimum viable product, just some prototypes that we can get into the world, get somebody to pay a little bit for them, hopefully see some results, and then take that back to investors. But that just gets back to my point of we had to be doing product development, obtaining IP, talking with investors, talking with customers, structuring pilots, all of that in tandem, or else we would not have been successful.
How big was your team?
So we started with 3. One of our co-founders was actually my co-founder Matt and I are the same age. We had one co-founder, Wesley, who's a year below us. She participated in the accelerator program with us, but was technically still in school at the time, and realized that she wanted to, after the accelerator, just wanted to pursue her degree in architecture, and that was more so where her passions lied, which totally understand. So we started off with just really 2, started with 3, and then it was Matt and I for the majority of it. And then we outsourced a lot of our work. We had interns every summer, and then we had an outsourced dev team. We had an outsourced sales team for a bit. We worked with a marketing group that actually made a strategic investment in Lunalight. So as opposed to bringing on full-time hires, we found groups that we liked and felt could provide what we needed in certain areas.
Sounds like a very strategic way to run a business, keeping your business very lean and just outsourcing whatever you need that is not your core competency. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, especially again, when you have a hardware component, that adds so much more complexity into the occasion, or into the equation, excuse me, where
of course.
You have to worry about manufacturing costs and production costs and parts and all of that. That uses up a lot of your resources.
Sounds like quite the journey.
Yes, indeed.
What were some of the more memorable moments, like for better or worse, with your time at Lunalights?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly, I would say for the better, like I mentioned earlier, just getting into the accelerator program, closing out our first round of funding, that was another huge validation piece. Our first implementation, it was actually with a client base. It was an assisted living community, actually up near you, Mike, in the northern suburbs of Chicago. And they were one of our early pilot sites, and then decided to convert to a full paying customer, and were with us through the entirety of Lunalights. But I remember when we converted them to a full customer, the implementation, as you would imagine for a first implementation, took a while, and there were a few bumps in the road with getting everything set up correctly. But so we were there, I think, all in for a week and a half to get everything installed, up and running, infrastructure set. And I think on one of the last days we were there, we were taking the elevator down to the parking lot. We were wrapping up for the day, and there was a resident and her adult daughter in the elevator. And they saw us holding the Lunalights boxes, and they're like, "Oh, you're the Lunalights guys." And we're like, "Yep." And they're like, "Well, even from having this being installed for a week, it has changed my life already. I feel so much more confident getting up at night." And for us, it was our first installation, so we had no idea how it was going to go. So even that anecdotal piece, when we got out to the cars, like we high-fived, we were so excited. We're like, "Oh my gosh, this is real. This is actually happening. We did it. We raised money, went through manufacturing, we're installing, and like we have something that people like." So that was, although much more minor, I would say, than raising capital, one of the coolest moments from the business.
Very reassuring.
Yes. So that was, those were some of the best. Some of the worst, I would say, on the financial side of things, getting very, 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 very close to running out of money. And that goes not only for the business, but also personally, because for us, it's first job out of college. So we don't have, and obviously Northwestern is not cheap. So we don't have the capital backing just personally to be able to sustain ourselves as well as the business for any extended period of time. So fortunately, we did really well with pitching and getting into different business plan competitions. We understood messaging and how to craft a compelling pitch, and non-dilutive capital is your friend early on, and that sustained us for a while, but it can only go so far.
What is that? So tell our listeners what non-dilutive capital is.
Yeah, essentially, if you get a grant or if you win money from a competition and your equity stake does not go down. Essentially, if someone does not ask for equity in exchange for putting money into the business.
That's the best.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So that is always difficult when you see your runway shrinking and you're panicking and you don't know what to do and where to get additional funds from, and you think the end is near. But while needing to maintain calm, cool, level-headed to the rest of your team and to your potential investors and your current clients and all of the other stakeholders. So that's tough. And then I think the realization that sometimes folks who you thought had your back may not have had your best interests in mind. That was also a very valuable life lesson, and goes to what we were discussing earlier about ensuring that you're working with the right people and truly doing the diligence to find those folks, but always disheartening when that occurs. And then craziest, I have a few just surreal moments. I think a couple, like, can't believe this is happening or that I'm in this position at 23, 24 years old. We were in an Under Armour pitch competition. We finished third from like over 250 applicants.
Wow.
And during that process, we got time with Kevin Plank, who's the former CEO, and spent a lot of time with him and his team. So that was pretty cool, just as a young kid, meeting with a very, very credible, legitimate individual who obviously built a very impressive athletic clothing empire.
Right.
I remember we were in another one when we worked out of a WeWork for a bit back in its heyday, and we were in the WeWork Creator Awards. Same thing. We got to like top 10 of this global creator awards search. The finals were in New York at Madison Square Garden. And I remember being like essentially first, second row with Adam Newman, who was the CEO at the time. And they had this huge celebration. Macklemore performed, and kind of thinking, this is pretty lavish for a celebration, but this is a cool situation that I did not expect myself to be in. Wow. So that was pretty surreal. And then even just minor ones. I mean, when we were doing production, we had everything ready to go, and then there was an earthquake somewhere that wrecked all of our printed circuit boards and delayed us for 6 to 8 weeks. And just like, all right, kind of got to roll with the punches. There's literally nothing we could have done on this, but frustrating nonetheless. Straight up bizarre. I remember we were at a Starbucks one time meeting with a guy, another alumni of Northwestern, who was a little bit older, just getting his thoughts on our business and the space and maybe seeking some investment. And the meeting went well. It was like 45-minute hour conversation, get up to leave. And we're in the parking lot, and he had left a couple minutes earlier. I think we were wrapping up some work. Somebody just literally grabs my arm, spins me around, and says, "Don't trust him. Don't trust a word he says." I was listening to everything. And I was with my business partner at the time, thank goodness, because obviously I was a little taken aback and just kind of went, "Oh, okay. All right, thanks for the heads up." And then got in the car and kind of said, "What in the hell was that?"
Crazy.
So you certainly run into those where you just kind of have to laugh, shrug it off, and say, "Well, guess it's part of the ride." Move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Donovan, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us. I think your short life so far has been so impressive, and I can't even begin to fathom where you're going to take your career as you continue on. So thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your history.
Of course. Yeah, no, thanks for I'm glad that we're doing this podcast. I think it's going to be a lot of fun as we dive deeper with our future guests and hear their stories as well. I think although you and I have had some experience with entrepreneurship, I fully believe that we will have multiple new learnings and takeaways from each episode. And I think our listeners will as well. So I'm excited to start this journey with you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We have quite the roster lined up to start some interviews. So this was a good episode 2, and man, I can't wait to dive into episode 3 with our next guest.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Thanks again. Bye-bye.